Hello everybody, and welcome to the sixth part of What If Naruto Was Neglected by His Family and Trained by Tobirama. I hope you enjoy this What If. Also, if you want part 7, comment, like and subscribe to the channel. Naruto, Tobirama's heir. Next morning. Uzumaki Namikaze households. Naruto woke up with a splitting headache and groaned in annoyance. This was not how he liked to start mornings, he mused, sitting up. Then the events of the previous day came rushing back to his now focused mind. What the hell happened to me yesterday? He asked himself, remembering the pain that arose in his stomach and rubbed it in thoughts. His thoughts were broken off when the door to his room opened and he smiled at the two people who walked in. "Ohio Ka-chan," he chirped happily, making the red-headed mother smile. She sat down by his side and kissed his head softly while he hugged her. Tobirama sat down on the chair to the side with a little smile at seeing the happy child. Then Naruto remembered the question that was now bugging him repeatedly. "Ka-chan," he whispered softly, getting a hum from the mother who was brushing his silky locks softly. "What happened to me yesterday?" he asked nervously, making her glance at Tobirama while biting her lip. He gave her a curt nod, making her pull him closer in a tight hug. She had tried to persuade Tobirama to stall it a bit, but the man had been firm in his stance, saying if she didn't do it then he would. That was one thing she wanted to tell him herself. "Naruto-chan, I have to tell you something, so please listen to me, all right?" she asked in a warm voice, making him look at her innocently and nod. He was getting nervous at seeing the nervous expression on his mother's face while his master was too serious than usual. Whatever it was would be something important, he mused. "Ka-chan, I'm not dying, am I?" he asked in a scared voice, making her eyes widen at his assumption and pull his face in her neck. "Baka, why would you think that?" "I won't let anything happen to my baby boy," she whispered, making him smile and kiss her neck happily. His fears now completely washed away. He was thinking he might have had some disease which was killing him, but this made him settle down. "Then what is wrong with me, Ka-chan?" he asked innocently, making her heart clench at his words and cradle him gently. She kissed his head with a deep breath to let it all out. "Nothing is wrong with you, baby," she whispered, not having the heart to tell him. Her eyes turned to Tobirama pleadingly, who had been silent up to now and knew she won't be able to tell him. He shook his head, silently telling her he had to know it today. It was better he found out from them rather than any outsider, who might even try and take advantage of his lack of knowledge to manipulate him. "Naruto." His stoic voice rang through the room, cutting the thick silence like hot knife through butter. He was met with those curious baby blue eyes as Kushina was holding him like a lifeline. "You have the soul of the Kyuubi sealed within you," he stated bluntly, making those blue eyes widen in shock. "What?" he stuttered in a small frightened voice, making Tobirama sigh tiredly and just nod to tell him he had heard him right. "Yes, your father didn't kill the beast 8 years ago, he merely sealed it. Bijou are immortal constructs of chakra that merely disperse and reform even if one does kill them in a few years. So he did the only thing he could. He split the Kyuubi into 3 parts, 4 taels worth of Yin chakra got sealed within your sister, 4 taels worth of Yang chakra in you brother, and 1 tael worth of concentrated demonic and natural energy in you along with its soul. You are the container of the Kyuubi no Kitsun's essence and consciousness," he said, and watched Naruto's face turn blank as his mind started processing everything. "So the special chakra that Mito and Menma have," he whispered, getting a nod from Tobirama, making him fall silent completely. "Demon spawn. Fox brat. Monster." All the whispers now made sense that he had heard around the village. Why he was treated like the plague and everyone just outright hated his existence. And they were right. They were right, I am a demon. He whispered, making Tobirama and Kushina widen their eyes in horror as he tried to hide within himself. Kushina was the first to break out of her stupor and cupped his cheeks to make his shimmering orbs to look in her eyes. He looked so lost and vulnerable, her heart tore away at his completely helpless state and she choked back a sob. Now was the time to make his doubts clear and give him the right direction. "Naruto-chan, you know about sealing, right?" she asked, getting a small nod from the frightened boy. "So when I seal a kunai in a scroll, does it become a kunai?" she asked as realization dawned on him as to what she was trying to portray. "But the soul," he was cut off by the stoic Senju this time, "is sealed within you. You and the Kyuubi are completely separate entities. The seal that appears on your stomach when you mold chakra is proof enough for this. The correct term to use for you would be a Jinchuriki," he stated when he heard Naruto whisper. The power of human sacrifice. He whispered the meaning of the word. He then started calculating on his earlier description about the ceiling. Then what happened to me yesterday? He asked in a small voice, making Kushina's heart clench at his frightened voice. When your brother unleashed the Kyuubi's chakra sealed within him, the Biju's consciousness within you became agitated, no doubt in anger when it felt its own chakra. It tried to weaken the seal by pushing its potent demonic chakra to loosen the seal, but I placed a tightening seal over it, so no need to worry about that anymore, he stated, getting a nod from the boy. But now he had one question that he needed answered right now. Why me? He asked simply, but those two words made Tobirama avert his eyes and Kushina to stiffen. Both knew what he was asking with those two simple words. Your siblings had taken after your mother, and since that chakra needs to be melded with your own to make it useful and under control, your father chose them due to their strong Uzumaki heritage. He knew you would take after him and awaken your own Kekkei Genkai, which would one day help you to tame and suppress the Kyuubi if it is ever needed. The Sharingan is the most effective of Kekkei Genkais when it comes to controlling Bijus, he explained, and Naruto said nothing. Now he knew why his siblings were regarded as heroes. They held the pure chakras while the curse and taint was thrust upon him. And to top it off, his own father had put it over him and him alone. So I was just a scapegoat who had been given a job to suppress the Biju if it ever tried to take over me, he asked, making Tobirama turn silent. It was true, no matter how cruel and blunt his words might be, that was the perfect explanation for it. Kushina, though, was dreading as to where he was going with this, and a pit of dread formed in her stomach. Naruchan, he did it for the good of the village. She whispered half-heartedly in a choked voice at seeing his sad smile and broken eyes. He shook his head and got off her arms and walked towards the door. Yes, I understand, Ka-chan, he did it for the good of the village, he said, making relief wash over her, but her eyes widened when she saw his teary eyes look back at her with a small sad smile. The village was saved, everyone lives happily. Mito and Menma are regarded as heroes for holding the huge power they were given. Everything went fine at a very small cost. He said softly in a sob. No, it wasn't. She tried, but he cut her off before she could go any further. Me, he whispered in a broken tone as the dam to his tears broke and everything became completely clear to him. The cost was very little, everyone got their share of happiness. But what about me? He asked, making her tear up herself, while Tobirama sat silently, knowing what he was saying was true in every word, even if it was dripping with anguish and agony. Everyone hates me, I don't have any friends of my own except Hinata. And I'm sure she too would leave me to myself when she realizes what I really am. I have watched children play with Mito and Menma and treat them like royalty, but when their parents see me they take them away. I saw everything, it hurt, but I let it go, not knowing the reasons. I tried to stay happy with what I had every day, I tried to smile when they smiled. But it hurt, it always did. I wanted a friend too, someone who cared about me and just talked to me, he spoke in tears, making her hands cover her mouth. She saw what he was bottling up all those years and how much it was hurting him. Then I found you, old man. He said with a little smile, while Tobirama smiled sadly, remembering the say he had first seen the lonely boy on that wooden swing. You became my friend, my teacher. To be honest, after knowing everything today, you are the father I never really had. I was born without one, but I got one in you, he said in a sob, and Tobirama couldn't help but feel the warmth that enveloped his chest and let loose a tear himself. But now I see what I am just a sacrifice. And to top it all off, the person who did sacrifice me was my own father. He whispered, walking out of the room while closing shut, and Kushina buried her face in her hands and sobbed. She got up to follow him and bring him back when a hand clasped her shoulder. She looked back to see the stoic face of Tobirama shaking his head. But Aji-san, he needs me. She was cut off by his ever-firm voice. He needs to sort this out on his own. You and I couldn't even begin to comprehend the turmoil he is in right now, let him have some time alone to cool off, he said warmly, making her tears renew. He hates Minato, doesn't he? She asked, making him fall silent for a few moments. I don't think so. He said, making her look at him in disbelief. You saw him, didn't you? His eyes held betrayal, anguish, pain, but not hate. He can try, but I know him, he doesn't hate the heart to hate him, or anyone for that matter, he said, making her fall on the bed tiredly. You know what scares me the most, Aji-san? She asked in a sniffle, making him look at her curiously. Everything, he said. I didn't have a word to make any of his words be any less true. To this day I hate the moment when Minato thrust everything upon his shoulders. Why only him? She asked in a sniffle, and he didn't say anything. Whatever he said would be more cruel and blunt to make it worse. Naruto walked down the stairs when Mito saw the tear-stained cheeks of her brother and instantly rushed to him. "What's wrong, Naru?" she asked worriedly, making the blonde smile at his baby sister. He said nothing, just cupped her cheek and rubbed it softly, merely walking past her a moment later. "Nothing's wrong, Mito, I just want to be alone for now," he spoke in his usual soft voice, walking out the door. Mito saw his retreating back and couldn't help but worry about him. She was about to go out and follow him when she heard a voice from behind her. "Let him go, Mito, he said he needs to be alone." "Let's get back to our training and not waste any more time, all right?" asked Menma, making her look at the door longingly one last time before nodding and following him out in the grounds. Meanwhile, Naruto walked aimlessly through the streets of the village. His mind too jumbled up with thoughts from the new things that were unraveled to him to even notice the cold glares and whispers going about around him. Before he knew it, he was on top of the Hokage monument. He went up to his usual spot and sat down on the fourth stone face while gazing at the village with a sad look, not at all like the usual shining eyes he always held. "Why did you condemn me to all this, Tusan? Was I nothing but a scapegoat to you too?" he asked to nobody while keeping his gaze on the vast expanse of the village. He closed his eyes with a tired sigh when he felt a small presence behind him, making him stiffen before relaxing, and let a small smile grace his lips. "You know, Hina-chan, you are really something to try and sneak up on me. You do know I have sensory abilities, right?" he asked and smiled wider in amusement when he heard a soft eep from behind him. The soft sounds of footsteps came from behind him until she was by his side. She sat down beside him and he couldn't help but smile as she was poking her fingers nervously while staring intensely at her lap. "So why were you following me, Hina-chan?" he asked curiously, making her cheeks turn pink as she realized she was sitting so close to him with no other person near them. And she just had to get caught, she thought sadly, wondering if he was angry at her. "I saw you walking through the shopping district, and you looked very troubled and sad. So I followed you," she whispered softly. He smiled at the concerned girl who was the only real friend he had. But for how long? She had told him the truth, except for the part that she had given her bodyguard Koa slip. Again. "So you were worried about me?" he asked, making her cheeks turn a rosy pink and nod shyly. "Hi, you're my friend," she said meekly. He looked straight ahead and closed his eyes when he felt the soft cool breeze pass his face. His silky golden locks rustled with it, making Hinata look at him adoringly. He looked so cute in her opinion with his calm expression, she thought, with a soft smile. She instantly averted her gaze with a blush when he looked back at her so as to not make him creeped out by her staring. "Friend, huh?" he said calmly, confusing her with his words. He saw her confused eyes stare at him curiously and smiled. "Would you still be my friend if I told you something that would make you hate me, Hinata?" he asked seriously, making her surprised when he used her full name. His voice held a newfound seriousness that made her understand it was quite important to her. "Yes, I'll always be your friend, Naruto-kun," she said shyly, making him smile sadly. "Even if I told you that I had the soul of the Kyuubi sealed in me, Hinata?" he asked in a sad voice, making her lavender orbs widen in shock. He averted his gaze while clenching his eyes shut. He just couldn't see her look at him with those hateful eyes. Does it hurt?" he heard her mumble softly, making him look at her in shock. He saw her looking at him worriedly instead of a hate-filled gaze as he had expected. What?" he asked, stuttering himself from her weird question. Does it hurt? You know, the fox was quite big, so it must." She trailed off while looking at him in pure concern. He looked at her in disbelief. "Don't you understand, Hinata? I have the Kyuubi sealed in me. That's why everyone hates me," he said, making two fox-like ears over his head to emphasize his point, and stared at her incredulously when she giggled softly in her hand. "I can never hate you," she said in her soft voice, but had lost her stutter in a rare occurrence. "You are not the Kyuubi. The Kyuubi was evil and dangerous, but you are kind, you always help someone if anyone needs it. You are not the big evil fox that everyone fears. You will always be Naruto-kun, my Naruto-kun," she said in her shy voice. He looked at her honest and soft voice while she looked at her lap, wondering how she had said so much, to him no less. She eeped softly when a pair of arms slid around her and wrapped her up in a hug. Hina-chan, you don't know how much it means to me what you said just now. Arigato. He whispered while burying his face in her neck. Hinata turned crimson when she felt herself pressed against him tightly while his soft breath tickled her neck. She hesitantly wrapped her arms around his chest and pressed her cheek to his chest. She could hear his heartbeat. She smiled when she felt his warmth envelop her and snuggled happily in his arms. She felt so happy and safe. Naruto held his only friend like a lifeline and couldn't help but admire how soft and small she felt in his arms. She smelt so nice too, just like a vanilla flower. If this is a dream, please don't make it end, thought the shy Hyuga heiress when, much to her disappointment, he broke the hug off. Naruto saw her gazing down at her lap in embarrassment when she realized her had involuntarily pulled her up on his lap in the hug. His arms were still around her and she wasn't going to complain. Naruto brushed the bang by her face behind her ear, making her ticklish, and tried to shy away from his touch. He saw her looking at him with her pink cheeks and he couldn't help but think how adorable she looked. He leaned down and pressed his lips on her cheek for a small innocent kiss to thank her like he always did for Mito and his mother. Hinata's heart hammered when she felt him kiss her cheek, and instantly her face resembled a tomato when she saw him giving her one of his sincere warm smiles. She stared at him with wide eyes while her hand traced the spot where he had kissed her. Naruto-kun kissed my cheek. Naruto-kun kissed me. Oh Kami. She squealed inwardly when she realized what had really happened, and all the blood in her body rushed to her cheeks. As the final words came to her mind, she did the only thing she could. She fainted. Naruto felt worried when he felt her head on his shoulder and realized she had fallen unconscious. He chuckled happily as he tucked her head under his chin and kept her in a warm hug until she was awake. You're too shy and cute for your own good sometimes, Hina-chan, he whispered with a smile. He felt so content and happy right now. All his negative thoughts and the feeling of being isolated in his own village now lay forgotten. He could still be accepted by people if they got to know him and find a few people at least. As he had found his first and best friend in the form of the peacefully snoring girl in his arms. He brushed her short indigo hair for 10 minutes in silence when he felt her move. He looked down to see her eyes stare into his and blink innocently. Her cheeks turned red when she realized what had happened and looked down at her lap in embarrassment. She had fainted. It was so embarrassing. Her musings were cut short when a hand cupped her cheek and made her look directly into the worried baby blue eyes of her crush. She felt him grab her wrist and raise her sleeve to show her bruised and blue skin. What happened, Hina-chan? He asked softly, making her look down in shame. Her eyes teared up when she remembered why she had left her house in the first place. Naruto pulled her in a warm hug when he heard her sniffle and rubbed her back while she cried her heart out in his neck. Her arms clutched his chest tightly like a lifeline. His heart tore away when he saw the state his friend was in. "Shh, Hina-chan, it's all right." He cooed softly to calm her down. She cried for 5 minutes before her sobs turned to sniffles and she just laid her face on his shoulder. He brushed her soft hair while placing a kiss on her head to calm her down. Her heart warmed at how he always cared for her no matter what, just like she did for him. "What happened?" he asked warmly after a few moments of comfortable silence. "Tusama had Niji-Nisan spar with me today to show my progress to the clan elders. I lost pretty badly and he slapped me before telling me I was a disgrace to the Hyuga name," she said in between soft sniffles, making a growl die down in his throat. He cradled the cute girl in his arms gently while his cheek rested overhead. All his own problems now lay forgotten and the only thing on his mind was how a kind girl like her was suffering so much. She snuggled in his embrace, feeling as if he was absorbing all her pain in his own chest, and listened to his heartbeat with a soft smile. "Hina-chan," he asked, running his fingers through her hair. "Hi," she squeaked out shyly, and he couldn't help the smile that graced his lips. "I cannot believe you lost so badly to your brother," he stated in a firm and confident voice, making her lavender orbs stare at him in surprise. She blushed a little at the confidence he held in her strength but looked down in shame when she realized it was all for naught. "Niji is a genius of our clan." She tried to make him understand but he cut her off in between. "Don't lie to me, Hinata, I know how strong you are. I have seen your spars in our academy. You are stronger than any other girl our age," he said in a warm and confident voice. Her eyes widened in surprise at his words. She looked into those fiery blue orbs that held the utmost faith in her. She tried to avert her eyes, but he caught her chin and made her look at his eyes. "Fight me, Hina-chan," he said softly, shocking her to the core. What?" she stuttered out in shock, but it did nothing to deter him. "Fight me," he said firmly, yet again making her gulp nervously. She couldn't fight him, anyone but him. He was the strongest in the academy, but that wasn't the reason she didn't want to fight him. "Please, not you," she squeaked out in embarrassment, making him smile. He cupped her cheek and rubbed it for reassurance like he always did for Mito, making her eyes stare at him innocently. "You will fight me, Hina-chan, now come on, let's go," he said, making her confused with his words. A moment later she squealed in surprise when he stood up, his arms under her knees and neck, carrying her bridal style. She blushed and wrapped her arms around his neck to keep from falling and tried to look anywhere but his grinning face. Her blush turned crimson when she felt his nose nuzzle against her cheek. "Ah, you're too cute, Hein-chan," he cooed in a teasing manner. She puffed her cheeks cutely. He always called her Hein-chan whenever he teased her, and glared a little when he outright laughed at her intimidating, well, as intimidating as it could be with her ever-present blush. She snuggled in his chest happily while he walked into the clearing behind the monument and put her down, much to her disappointment, and stepped back. She looked at him pleadingly when he flexed his muscles and dropped into his stance. "Come on, Hina-chan, take your stance. I have wanted to fight the strongest taijutsu style in our village for a long time," he chirped happily, making her nod meekly and drop into the revered gentle fist stance. Her eyes shot open in surprise when he was off in a burst of speed with a roundhouse kick heading for her head. She brought her arm up on instincts alone and blocked it, elegantly parrying it away. Her eyes followed his flowing hair and the small smile showing how much he was enjoying it. She had watched that look several times. He always seemed to be so confident, even on the edge of losing he would just smile like that and do something completely unpredictable. She loved that look no matter how many times she had seen it. She just wished she could have half the determination he had. She pushed her arm forward towards his stomach. Naruto saw her hand coming towards his waist and slapped it with the back of his hands towards his side efficiently. His eyes met hers for a moment before he launched a punch at her face. His own eyes widened when he saw her crouch down instantly and swipe her leg horizontally to take his legs out. He backflipped to avoid her attack and was surprised when his sharp eyes caught her coming for another palm strike when he landed and flipped yet again. Hinata was shocked but didn't let up her charge and charged forward, involuntarily activating her Byakugan in the spur of a moment. She was stunned beyond belief as she forced palm after palm, and he flipped again and again 8 times before landing on his feet with that same confident smirk plastered on his face. Such agility and speed. Not even Niji is so quick at dodging each of my attacks, he has to resort to blocking too, she thought, and looked at he crush in admiration. Naruto smiled as he saw her sweat-glistened face and how she dropped into her gentle fist stance again. Her attacks were quite relentless and to the mark. Any lesser opponent would have been down, since he remembered Tobirama telling him a single brutal palm strike was all it needed before you were down. And her father calls her a failure. If I didn't know any better, that brother of hers just won on luck alone, he thought in admiration for her himself as he watched her waiting for his charge. He had noted her eyes changing into her Kekkei Genkai and couldn't help but see the difference, as those eyes seemed to be looking right through him instead of at him. I feel so naked. He sweat dropped and shook away those thoughts. He charged ahead to end it with this one. He cocked his fist back and launched it in front of her with a feint. Her Byakugan though rendered his deception useless, and she blocked his hand with a palm and cocked back her other hand to finish it with a strike to his chest. Naruto readied his hand for a block but knew he was done for, as she had his fist in her grip and would end it now. He had underestimated her eyes and now he would pay for it. He launched his free hand towards her face in a punch and saw her eyes widen. Hinata watched his fist come and stop mere inches before her nose and sighed in relief. She smiled as their spar came to an end. "You win, Naruto-kun," she said softly, her eyes reverting back to their normal as the veins around them disappeared. She watched his face turn blank and look at her strangely. "Do I look weak to you, Hinata?" he asked neutrally, making her eyes widen in shock and shake her head immediately. What? "Not at all, Naruto-kun," she stammered out instantly, though his eyes narrowed in on her. Her eyes teared up at his mild glare. "Then why did you pull your attack back at the last moment?" he asked, making her look down. She had done that. She mumbled something softly which he didn't hear and repeated it again a bit louder. I couldn't hurt you Naruto-kun, she whispered softly, making his eyes soften at his friend. Now he knew what the problem was. You do know that pulling back an attack at your opponent in a spar is a disrespect to his strength, he asked her, making her look at him in shock. What you just did is the worst form of disrespect you can give me, Hina-chan. Losing would have been great, but what you just did is far worse than that, he said firmly, making her eyes turn misty from tears. I didn't mean to. Please don't hate me, she stammered as tears streamed down her eyes in fright. She was instantly wrapped up in a warm hug and she cried in his chest softly. She couldn't lose him, he was her only friend too. She held her tightly and put his chin on her head. I can never hate you, Han-chan, you're my best friend, he whispered, making her sobs turn soft and look at him with her puffy eyes and red cheeks that were a bit swollen and made her look all the more adorable in his eyes. But never pull back anything in a spar. We spar so that when we fight for real we would know what we would be up against. What if Niji died because he thought that his opponent would pull back a little too, he asked softly, wiping her cheeks. She gasped as she realized the truth in his words. She hadn't ever thought of it like that. She looked at him innocently and sniffed when she saw his warm smile. So the next time you spar with Niji, fight him like you did with me until the very end. You're strong, Haim, really strong. I see it, and your father will see it too when he sees you go all out in your next spar, he said softly, making her look at him with a soft smile and a little blush. Why you think I'm strong? She asked shyly, making him smile and tuck her lock of free hair behind her ear, and like always she tried to shy away from his soft touch in embarrassment but didn't pull back. Of course you're strong. With those back-to-back strikes I was back flipping for my life there, you know, he said playfully, making her giggle and hit his chest softly. This was her friend, serious and calm one moment and happy, lazy, and playful the next. Arigato, she said shyly, and he nodded when she felt him turn around and crouch down, making her quite confused. Hop on, Haim, you won and now you get a free ride home, he said playfully, making her giggle and wrap her arms around his neck from the back. He put his arms around her knees and picked her up piggyback style. She put her chin on his shoulder as he started jumping down the trees and through various rooftops quickly. She glanced at his eyes that were looking ahead and how his hair flowed in the wind. She nuzzled her cheek against his, happily making him do the same as he hopped towards the Hyuga clan compounds. Hyuga clan compounds. Naruto jumped down and crouched down as she stepped down when they reached the gates. All right, Hina-chan, I'll see you at the academy tomorrow, all right, he asked, getting a meek nod from her. He rose an eyebrow when she fiddled with her feet and her cheeks were red in embarrassment from something. What's the matter, Hina-chan? He asked in a concerned voice. She looked up and quickly pecked his cheek, muttering arigato, before hopping back into her house, leaving a stunned Naruto behind. He scratched his cheek, which had turned pink, and grinned foxily, tucking his hands in his pockets to walk back home while shaking his head. She really is something else, all right, were his last thoughts as he made his way home. Kanahagaku no Sato. Time skip 1 month later. A training field on the outskirts of the village. Is this exercise really necessary, old man? Asked the calm voice of our favorite blonde, who was a bit peeved at the condition he was in at the moment. This exercise will really help you if that is what you are asking me, came the answer from the stoic visage of his master. You might ask why Naruto was so peeved. Well, he was currently standing on his hands upside down. Now one might say that isn't a really big thing for a training shinobi, but it would be since his master was standing on the soles of his feet with his arms crossed and his eyes closed. Keep your chakra stable to make me stick to your feet, and your balance must be perfect. This has multiple advantages for you, he said in his ever-calm tone to the blonde who had his shirt off, along with Tobirama as the half-naked master and disciple went forward towards their next phase of training. And what would that be, old man? Asked Naruto calmly, trying to focus as best as he could under the enormous strain the exercise was putting on him. You have to keep pumping chakra into the muscles of your arms so that you could counter the strain of my weight and not slip off the wet surface underneath. Also, just like the surface sticking exercise, you have to keep the perfect amount of chakra to the soles of your feet to keep me balanced perfectly, he said, getting a grunt of agreement from the blonde underneath him. Plus, since I am not focusing on developing the strength of your body and instead focusing on speed and agility, The resistance your muscles build to counter the enormous strain would make you more efficient at blocking heavy blows from your enemy and not be completely defenseless if the enemy counters your speed somehow, he said, making Naruto realize there were quite a few advantages to this exercise. But still. Do we have to do this underneath a waterfall then? He asked tiredly, making Tobirama smirk. He had picked the location for the exercise to be underneath a waterfall, henceforth the annoyance of his disciple over the past couple of weeks. He was surprised that he had resisted so long without complaining. Yes, the water flowing all around you makes it harder for you to focus. The ground underneath you is slippery, making another obstacle. And most meditation exercises are done in places like these for that very reason. You know why we have to make you emotionally and mentally stronger, don't you? He asked, getting a strained "hi" from the blonde. I didn't want to waste your time on only meditation exercises and make your training fall behind. So I made you do this instead, he said ever calmly, and Naruto wobbled a bit before getting his balance right and sighed in relief, making some water spout in his mouth much to his annoyance. This was the way shinobi used to train back during the clan wars era. After the formation of villages, peacetime settled in and exercises were made a lot easier. This is old school, as you would put it, he said, and jumped with a flip in the air to the shore when Naruto started falling down. He saw him falling freely and jumped forward, catching him mid-fall, and saw that he had fallen unconscious from the drain it put on him. 1 hour and 37 minutes, you broke your previous record then, disciple, he muttered to himself with a smirk and laid him down under the shade of a tree. He saw the calmly snoring blonde with an innocent expression on his face, making him smile. He was worried what he might do and outright change after the truth to his burdens were revealed. He didn't know what had happened in the few hours he was gone that day, but whatever had happened to him to make him just accept the truths made him glad. What he felt on them was a whole different matter altogether, since he didn't want to talk about it. Kushina and himself hadn't pushed the matter any further to let him have his space. His thoughts then turned to a different place altogether. He gazed at a particular spot in the forest and his hands blurred through some strange hand signs which did nothing. A few moments later a few silhouettes appeared kneeling in front of him in a formation. 2 of them wore strange animal masks, with the leader wearing a dog mask. Tobirama-sama, said Inu while bowing his head. Tobirama nodded in acknowledgement to the man as well as the 4 figures behind him. So what did you find out? He asked in a voice that meant business. Inu took out a small envelope from his hip pouch and handed it to the man. Tobirama scanned through its contents quickly with a critical gaze, making sure he had done and read everything right. He scowled as he finished reading it and incinerated the papers with a small fire jutsu. So Root still exists, he said finally after a few moments of tense silence, getting a nod from them all. He closed his eyes in thought for a second before speaking up. Hiruzen has gotten too lax. Even after the various atrocities Danzo has committed, that fool is letting him roam free within the village with such a high standing in the council, he surmised, making the 5 of them just nod silently. Inu's eyes traveled to the softly sleeping boy and his mismatched eyes softened beneath his mask. So he really is your apprentice then, Naidame-sama? He said, breaking him out of his thoughts for a moment and smile as he followed his gaze. Yes, I've taken him under my wing. It's nice to actually raise a student who doesn't disappoint me like my previous ones, he said with a hint of venom at the end, making them all turn silent. Inu removed his mask along with Nico behind him, breaking the ANBU code by revealing their identities to someone other than the current Hokage, showing the faith they still held in the man. So what do you propose then, Naidame-sama? Asked Kakashi, making all pairs of eyes turn to him curiously. He said nothing, gazing at them all with his narrowed gaze, making them squirm under his intense eyes. They still held the power they did when he reigned over the village, and they couldn't help but be intimidated by the man. Might Guy, Genma Shiranui, Yugao Yuzuki, Asuma Sarutobi, and Kakashi Hatake sat there kneeling in front of him like their Kage, awaiting his response. He is a threat to the village, along with his operations that he has going underneath the village's nose, he said, pointing to the leftover ashes of the papers, making them all nod. You all do know that what you really have and are doing can be considered treason by the village, he asked after a moment, getting just silence from them all. Yes, but if it helps the village then it can't be considered treason really. Sandaime-sama has let a lot happen underneath the village's eyes, and if it comes to us to clean it, then so be it, came the firm reply of Genma Shiranui, making Tobirama raise an eyebrow. He is your Hokage, he stated, getting a shake of the head from the Senbon munching man. I was sworn in under Yandame-sama's reign as his personal guard. My loyalties lay first and foremost to him and his family, then to the good of the village, he said, making Tobirama smile. That was why he had chosen these 5 to go in undercover and retrieve information from the main branches of the shinobi departments. He looked into their determined eyes and couldn't help but feel pride in their eyes. The will of fire still burns brightly within the village, you envisioned Hashirama. He thought in nostalgia at remembering the beliefs of his deceased elder brother, and a moment later his eyes hardened to the eyes of the veteran Kage who had taken command over the Leaf in 2 great shinobi wars. Then I have a mission for the 5 of you which will be done in the shadows of the Leaf, he said cryptically, getting a nod from them all. Tonight we move in, you 5 will accompany me to do what should have been done years ago, he said, making them all nod silently. What do you intend to do, Tobirama-sama? Came the rarely serious voice of Guy, making him look at him coldly, and the man shivered at the look of steel in his eyes. Tonight I will clean out the mess that Hiruzen has spread in the depths of the village. And I will not make the same mistake he did all those years ago with his prized pupil, he said, making realization dawn on their faces. The mission was clear to them now, even if he hadn't said it clearly. Danzo Shimura will be assassinated tonight. Meanwhile, in the Hyuga clan compounds. Hajime, rang the voice of the Hyuga clan head through the training dojo. His stoic and blank face gazed at the young ones dropping into the gentle fist stance for their spar. The Hyuga elder stood by his side to make the deduction of the monthly progress the Hyuga clan heiress was making. Veins bulged around Hinata's eyes as she slipped her palm up front and her other palm by her waist, awaiting her opponent's charge. Niji's Byakugan glared at the indigo-haired girl before charging forward with a quick palm thrust. Hinata looked at the incoming attack till the last moment before briefly tilting his head to the side while the chakra lace strike whizzed past her ear harmlessly. She brought the palm around her waist forward, making Niji's eyes shoot open in surprise, and instantly jumped back, but still got a glancing blow, making him grunt and hiss in pain. He narrowed his eyes at the girl re-entering the gentle fist stance again. But all he focused on were her eyes. They didn't look as hesitant or nervous as before, like their previous spar. The look in her eyes has changed. What is going on, he thought to himself before shaking the thought off with a smirk and charged forward. No matter, fate has decreed that I shall win this spar like always. She is destined to lose like the failure she is, he thought confidently, thrusting his palm forward that was slapped to the side efficiently by the girl, and he dodged her strike yet again. He smirked when he saw her outstretching her arm and went in to finish the spar. He brought his palm in a curve to her waist for her liver, but was shocked when she rolled around him and was back to back with him, using her superior flexibility in a completely unpredictable maneuver. She turned around and thrust her 2 fingers to the back of his neck. He saw the strike coming with his Byakugan's 360-degree vision and rolled forward to dodge the hit and make some distance between them. He couldn't believe it, he was on the defensive this time. The last time he had utterly humiliated her, but she was quite fierce in her strikes this time. He was caught off guard by her sudden charge and blocked her palm strike to the side barely, but his eyes widened at the second incoming strike. He tried to move away, but he got a glancing hit to his waist near his kidneys and winced in pain. That's enough, rang the voice of Hayashi, making the 2 stop instantly. Niji growled and seethed inwardly. He had lost to the failure. She had gotten the hit in their first spar. But how? There wasn't an ounce of hesitation or pulling back her blows like always. What had made her change so much? He thought furiously as he watched Hayashi and the elder Hyuga by his side walk up to Hinata. Hinata bowed politely, as was the custom when she felt a hand clasp her shoulder. Her lavender pearls looked up to see Hayashi's stoic face. But she noticed the slight smile and the hint of pride in his eyes. You have improved a lot over the past month, Hinata, just like what the Hyuga clan expects from its heiress, next in line to the throne, he said stoically, making her eyes widen in shock. She had just gotten a single glancing blow and there were several more spars to go yet. Indeed, that was a most excellent maneuver, came the voice of the elder beside her father, making her even more shocked. Her eyes watered a little from the first form of appreciation she had gotten from her father, making Hayashi's eyes harden. Do not look weak, Hinata, he scolded in a half-hearted tone, making her wipe her eyes and nod apologetically. Gomen-sama, there was something in my eyes, she said with soft sniffle, making the 2 men glance at each other and smile a little. She couldn't lie to save her life, but it was nice that she was trying to negate her weaknesses now. All right, let's get back to it, There are several more spars to go, barked out Hayashi commandingly, making her nod and return to the middle of the ring while Niji walked off and Ko took his place. He threw her a death glare before walking off that she didn't notice. There was a soft smile plastered on her face as she stepped back to avoid the palm from her opponent and jumped a little for a kick to his chest. A pair of eyes watched her elder sister adoringly from the slightly open door in complete admiration. "Wani-sama is so kind, pretty and strong," were the thoughts of a young Hanabi as she watched her sister spar with the branch member for a few hours from the crevice in the open door. A few hours later, Hinata walked out of the dojo. Her clothes and skin bruised and battered, with a tired yet happy soft smile on her face. She walked through the hallways and quickly made her way down to the gates of the compound. Hanabi watched her sister run out of the compound and followed behind her curiously as to where she was going. Hinata ran through the streets and into the Uchiha clan's abandoned training ground. Hanabi followed her happily and watched as her Wani-sama hid behind a tree shyly and grew confused. She followed her gaze to see a blond boy standing on the porch of the wooden port on the lake. She watched the boy's hands move in some strange ways which were too quick for her young eyes to follow. Her eyes widened at what followed a moment later. "Fire style, grand fireball jutsu," she heard the boy shout, and much to her amazement he spouted a narrow stream of flames before they expanded in a huge fireball. The red-hot flames made a hiss in the calm water of the lake as Naruto watched on with a smirk at the perfect fireball. Finally, he thought with a tired sigh and smiled a little when his senses tingled towards a familiar presence. "So what brings you by, Hina-chan?" he asked in thin air, making Hanabi shocked and narrowed her eyes at the boy if he tried to hurt her Wani-sama who had been caught. She watched her elder sister run up to him and throw herself in his arms. Naruto chuckled as he twirled her around while she squealed a little in glee and put her down. He brushed her hair as he heard her giggle in his neck and was slightly curious at her newfound happiness. "You seem awfully happy today, Haim-chan," he teased, but much to his amazement she looked at him and giggled softly with a nod. He rose an eyebrow at her strange behavior when she spoke up. "Tu-sama praised me today, Naruto-kun. And it's all because of you," she chirped in a happy soft voice, making him raise an eyebrow. "Me? What did I do?" he asked in a lost voice, making her giggle and kiss his whiskered cheek in happiness. She didn't even have the heart to feel shy as to how happy she felt right now. Naruto's cheeks turned pink and he rubbed his neck nervously in embarrassment. She put her face in his neck and hugged him tightly. "Arigato," she whispered softly, making him smile and hug her back happily. Though he broke the silence a moment later. "But you didn't tell me you brought a little guest with you," he said, making her look at him in confusion and tilted her head to the side cutely. He pointed to some bushes and she instantly activated her Byakugan and rushed to the bushes with wide eyes. "Hanabi," she shouted, running and picking her baby sister up in her arms. She blushed when she realized she had hugged and kissed Naruto-kun again, and in front of her sister no less. "What are you doing here, Imuto?" she asked and gushed over how dirty she had become, making the little girl grow quite embarrassed from her sister's actions. "I followed you, Wani-sama, but who is he?" she asked, pointing to Naruto, who now stood by her side with his hands in his pockets with his usual lazy expression marring his face. His eyes looked at her expectantly, making her sigh tiredly at her little sister's recklessness. "She is my sister Naruto-kun, her name is Hanabi," she said in her usual slight stutter, making him chuckle. "I was wondering when you would do that again," he said in chuckles, making her cheeks turn red in embarrassment and poked her fingers shyly. Now he was back to teasing her and she wasn't her hyper-happy self anymore. Hanabi glared at him heatedly, seeing him embarrass her Wani-sama so much. "Hey, don't be mean to my Wani-sama," she shouted in her squeaky voice, making him raise an eyebrow at the little outburst. Hinata's eyes widened in shock. "Hanabi," she hissed, but both parties ignored her. Naruto crouched down, looking at the small glaring 3-year-old with his lazy smile. He put his finger on her nose and pushed her back a little, making her yelp and stumble slightly. "And what are you going to do about it, my little firecracker?" he asked in amusement, making her throw a death glare at him. It made her look all the more adorable as he pinched her chubby cheeks happily. "Stop doing that. And my name's Hanabi Hyuga, not Firecracker, she said as she tried to slap away his hand, but he continued on with her other cheek, much to her annoyance. "And I am the younger daughter of the head family of the Hyuga clan," she said, trying to make him intimidated like everyone did when she told them who she was, but it instead made Naruto gush at her even more. "Ah, so you're a royal firecracker, isn't that cute?" He cooed happily, making her cheeks turn red from his pinching and blushing and embarrassment and anger. Hinata was giggling in her hand softly at how Hanabi was trapped in Naruto's teasing. She rubbed her cheeks in irritation when he let her go and glared at him, which he shrugged off happily. "Who are you?" she asked, making him smile lazily and bring his hand forward to ruffle her hair, which made her let out a whine. "The name's Naruto, my little firecracker," he said lazily, and she fixed her hair while glaring at him angrily. Who did he think he was anyways? She thought angrily. No one had ever teased her so much and always treated her like royalty, though she was only 3 and a little chubby. He turned to Hinata with a soft smile and rubbed her cheek softly, much to the little one's annoyance, while Hinata blushed and shied away from his touch cutely. "So I'll see you tomorrow at the parents' special day at the academy, Hina-chan." "Now I'll go, I'm beat from training today," he asked, getting a meek nod from the shy girl. He waved his hand as the 2 girls watched his retreating back. "Oh, and I always knew you would do it, Hina-chan," he said with a slight wink, making her avert her eyes and look down shyly. He chuckled and went towards his home. She caught Hanabi's little hand in her own, walking back to the Hyuga compounds. "You shouldn't sneak out from home without anyone knowing, Hanabi. It is dangerous," she scolded in her soft voice, making the girl puff her cheeks cutely. "But I wanted to see where you went, Wani-sama," she squeaked out, making her smile and pull her head around her waist. They walked in silence while Hanabi smiled at the small hug her Wani-sama was giving her. But then she remembered the annoying blonde with those strange whiskered cheeks from before. "I don't like whiskers," she muttered angrily, making Hinata giggle and rub her head softly, knowing what or who she really meant. "He's not that bad once you get to know him, Hanabi," she said softly, making Hanabi look up at the admiration her voice held for him. She said nothing and walked back to her house in silence. That night. Senju clan compounds. Tobirama clicked his blue battle armor in place and picked up the faceplate with the leaf insignia printed over it with a soft gaze. He rubbed it with his thumb with a strange gaze. He hadn't thought he would ever have to put it on again, but drastic times called for drastic measures. He smiled when he saw the 5 awaiting figures outside. He had chosen them, seeing they held the village above the council or even their acting kage if it meant the welfare of the leaf. "Let's move," he said in a commanding voice, getting a nod from the 5, each of who had donned the blank ANBU masks and armor for tonight. They whizzed past the rooftops, around the ANBU patrols in complete stealth, and towards the residential district near the Hokage Tower. They crouched down and gazed at the house from 5 different angles like hawks looking at their prey. Tobirama raised his hand and made several hand signs to give them their orders. "There must be route ANBU in the shadows. Be on guard and eliminate anyone who appears suspicious without a thought. The target will be eliminated by my hands," were his orders. The 5 nodded and disappeared into thin air, with Tobirama doing the same. He scaled the silent hallways with complete precision and stealth, his hawk-like eyes catching a slight disturbance in the air. He took out a kunai and twirled around the corner to stab it in the jugular of the root ANBU hiding under a camouflage genjutsu. He fell down with a slight thud while Tobirama moved forward towards the room where the target resided in. He saw the house down the garden way and the 2 groups of ANBU patrolling around a single room. His eyes narrowed when he saw 2 figures hover above them. The purple-haired ANBU cleaved the heads of the 3 ANBU clean as she fell down the middle in complete silence. Kakashi's hand sparkled in electricity and it in the chest of the ANBU, while Asuma cleaved the heads of the 2 remaining ones with his trench knives. He always knew his father was getting soft, but after he had seen the files and what the man had overlooked for the supposed good of the village, he had instantly agreed and wanted in on the Senju's plan to clean off some filth himself. Genma and Guy took points at the door as Asuma kicked the locked door open. Gain grabbed the ANBU that charged at them by his neck and snapped it with a flick in an instant as the dead body fell down like a sack of potatoes, while Genma launched several senbons at the shocked ANBU, several fatal points as he too fell dead in a silent thud. Tobirama and Kakashi walked in to see the one-eyed cripple glaring heatedly at them. "What is the meaning of this, Tobirama sensei?" he asked angrily, making Tobirama look at him with his cold onyx eyes. "I am merely doing what should have been done years ago," he said, making Danzo growl angrily at the man. "Do you have the heart to take out your own student?" he asked to manipulate his teacher's emotions, while the 5 had circled around all the exit points of the room and were watching the surrounded men like hungry predators. "I am not Hiruzen Danzo," he said before he vanished in a blue blur as a burst of speed. His 2 fingers sparkled with wind chakra laced in them as he moved them towards the bandages covering his left eye. His fingers went clean through the bandages, courtesy of the wind chakra in them, and he plucked out the eye in the supposed empty eye socket with a squelch. None of them even moved a little as Danzo jumped back and hissed in pain while clutching his bleeding left side of the face and glared at him heatedly. "How did you know I had it?" he asked while gritting his teeth at the unexpected attack, and watched as Tobirama put the Sharingan in his right palm in a small vial and sealed it in his wrist with the other one to match it. "That you do not need to know," he said coldly, making him clench his fists in anger at losing such a powerful eye in an instant when he let his guard down for but a moment in front of his sensei. The man was a true shinobi still, and unlike Hiruzen would finish him off without hesitation. He had to escape. Ratboar monkey. He went through hand seals and activated his jutsu when a yellow sparkling blade pierced his chest a moment later. He gurgled blood as he watched the hardened eyes of Tobirama Senju and his hands holding the legendary Raijin no Ken, which was pierced in his chest. Tobirama's eyes widened when he saw the man in front of him disappear and rolled to the side to avoid a kunai. He watched with narrowed eyes as Danzo jumped back towards the exit behind him, but Yugao covered it while unsheathing her sword. Tobirama ran the situation in his head. He had definitely pierced Danzo and not a clone. He wasn't in any genjutsu, that was for sure. Then, "How did you escape?" he asked, making Danzo turn silent and said nothing for a moment. "Why are you doing this, sensei?" "I always did what was good for the village." "Is this for the Uchihas?" "You hated them." He was cut off by Tobirama's cold voice. "Don't assume you know me, Shimura." He spat out venomously. "I never hated the Uchiha. I always kept everyone who were suspicious or a threat to the village under scrutiny, be it the Uchihas or the Senjus. But I would never fall as low as to do what you manipulated Hiruzen into. You both wiped out the founding clan of this village to near extinction in a mere night." "For what?" he asked coldly, making Danzo growl in anger. "They were planning a rebellion, sensei," he argued, making Tobirama's eyes turn even colder. "And Shursue was about to stop them until you killed him for his eyes," he said, making Danzo's eyes widen in shock as to how he came across whose eye it really was. "But that was a temporary solution. They would have rebelled again, and you know an Uchiha was behind the Kyuubi attack too," he argued yet again, making Tobirama smile sadly. "You always were power-hungry, Danzo. I had seen it when you were under my command. That was why I never chose you for the position of Hokage, even though you were a better choice than Hiruzen. You wanted the whole world under the thumb of the leaf with you as its supreme commander," he said, making Danzo glare at him. "And what is wrong with that? I wanted to achieve true peace. I did what I had to," he said, making Tobirama smile sadly. "And I am doing what I have to," he said, vanishing in a blue flash, and appeared behind Danzo a second later, making everyone's eyes widen at seeing the original Hirai Shin in action. He pointed his sword down when Danzo's head fell down clean off his shoulders with a thud. Kakashi, Guy, and Genma watched in horror when Danzo disappeared yet again and appeared behind Yugao completely unharmed. Asuma pushed her away when he tried to stab a kunai in her chest and started going through head seals, with Kakashi going through his own. "Wind style, vacuum wave, / earth style, earth wall," both exclaimed at the same time when a wall of mud was erected in front of Tobirama, Yugao, and Asuma while it broke off from Danzo's jutsu. Kakashi cancelled the jutsu and saw Danzo not there anymore. Asuma punched the ground in anger. "Damn it. That bastard is like a cockroach. No matter how many times you squash him, he keeps getting back up," he shouted in anger when he realized they had failed the mission. He felt a hand grasp his shoulder and turned around to face Tobirama with a small smile. "Do not worry, he will have to escape the village now. He cannot stay here any longer. There way too many evidences and leaks that he would have to explain if he did, sparing the dead root ANBU in this mansion currently. The village is rid of him for the time being. His time will come, keep your cool. A shinobi loses when he lets his emotions loose in times of stress. That is why I made Rule 27 of the Shinobi Code, so that no shinobi may show emotions on a mission. Let's go and seal up those bodies for future evidence in case it comes back to us." "The mission isn't over yet," he said stoically, making the young Sarutobi nod and stand up while they started sealing up the dead bodies and various other evidences from the mansion that they found. Tobirama clenched his fist in anger and just couldn't understand how he was still alive even after he had killed him for sure not one but 2 times. Danzo, you will die by my hands, mark my words. He thought as they left the now abandoned and clean Shimura mansion and disappeared, scattering like shadows in the death of night.